They hurt you, and then they vanished. No apology, no explanation, not even a trace of guilt. Just silence. You're left replaying everything, wondering how someone who once swore they cared could disappear so easily after breaking you apart. But what if I told you that silence isn't random? It's a strategy, a weapon they use to keep control long after the fight is over. Narcissists don't just walk away, they watch to see if you'll chase. They want your confusion, your pain, your overthinking, because every time you react, they win again. In this video, I'll reveal why narcissists ignore you after hurting you, what that silence really means, and the hidden reason they vanish when you need closure most. Trust me, it's not what you think. And by the end, you'll see the game they play so clearly, they'll never be able to use it on you again. So stay with me till the end. And if you've ever felt that painful silence, drop a "I understand" in the comments, because this time, you're the one who's about to take your power back.
When a narcissist suddenly disappears after hurting you, it feels like the ground has been pulled out from under your feet. One day, they're creating chaos, yelling, twisting words, accusing you of things you didn't do. And the next, there's nothing. No messages, no calls, just silence. It's not because they've realized what they've done or need time to think. No, this vanishing act is carefully calculated. They disappeared not out of guilt, but out of control. They want you to sit there, heart racing, wondering what went wrong, questioning your worth, and searching for answers that will never come. The silence is their way of keeping you hooked, because confusion is their favorite form of control. When you don't know where you stand, you start trying to fix things. You replay conversations in your mind, you apologize for things that weren't even your fault, and you start thinking maybe you were too sensitive. That's exactly what they want, to see you chase after them while they sit in silence, feeling powerful, watching you break yourself apart just to get their attention again. This disappearance is their version of emotional dominance. It's their way of saying, "I decide when you matter." Narcissists crave power, and the easiest way to get it is by withdrawing affection and communication after they've wounded you. They feed off your reaction. The longer you wonder, the more you think about them, the more energy you pour into the silence they've created. It's like they've cast a spell, one made of unanswered questions and unspoken words, and as long as you're trapped in that space of confusion, they still have you. They thrive on that invisible pull, the emotional chaos you feel when you don't understand what's happening. To them, your anxiety is proof that they still matter in your world. What makes this so cruel is how deliberate it is. Narcissists know exactly what they're doing when they vanish. They know their sudden silence will trigger your empathy and make you question yourself. They know you'll wonder if you said something wrong or if they're just hurt and need space. But the truth is, they enjoy watching you try to decode their behavior. It gives them the satisfaction of knowing you're still emotionally invested, while they pretend to be calm, detached, and unbothered. It's a performance, one where they play the victim and you're left holding all the pain. The real reason they vanish is because they fear accountability. Facing you would mean admitting the harm they caused, and that's something they can't handle. So instead of saying sorry, they run. Instead of facing the truth, they hide behind silence. It's their way of escaping responsibility while still controlling the emotional atmosphere. They disappear, but not to heal. They disappear to keep you from healing. Because as long as you're waiting for closure, you're still connected to them. And that's exactly where they want you, suspended between pain and hope, still reaching for someone who was never planning to stay.
When a narcissist goes silent,
It's not because they're calm, mature, or trying to keep the peace. Their silence is calculated. It's not the kind of silence that brings healing. It's the kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. This silence is their weapon, their way of making you feel small, guilty, and desperate for their attention. It's a psychological trap, and it's designed to make you question everything: what you said, what you did, and even who you are. You start replaying the last conversation, overanalyzing every word, wondering where you went wrong. But the truth is, you didn't. You didn't deserve the silence. They just needed a way to reassert their control without lifting a finger. The narcissist's quietness is never about resolution. It's about domination. They use it to make you feel uncertain, to twist your emotions until you're the one apologizing, even when they're the one who caused the pain. By saying nothing, they make you do all the emotional work. You fill in the blanks with guilt, fear, and longing. And that's exactly how they maintain power. Their silence tells you, you don't matter enough for a response. And that message hits harder than any insult. It's meant to humiliate you, to make you feel invisible, and to remind you that they decide when the conversation ends. What makes this tactic so devastating is how invisible it looks from the outside. To others, it might seem like they're just giving space or avoiding conflict. But you know better. You can feel the chill behind it. This kind of silence has weight. It's heavy, cold, and intentional. They can sit across the room from you, completely still, saying nothing, yet you can feel the hostility radiating off them. You can sense the judgment in every second of quiet. And the longer it lasts, the more trapped you feel, like you're being punished for wanting connection. This silence also allows them to rewrite the story. When they eventually decide to speak again, they'll act like nothing happened, as if their coldness was your imagination. They might even accuse you of overreacting. That's part of the manipulation, to make you doubt your perception of reality. It's emotional gaslighting in its purest form. They want you to believe you created the distance, not them. And once you start believing that, they've won. But here's the truth they never want you to realize. Their silence says more about their fear than your worth. They go quiet because real communication exposes their weakness. They can't handle accountability or vulnerability, so they hide behind a wall of silence and call it strength. But silence doesn't make them strong. It reveals their emptiness. They punish you with quiet because they can't face themselves in the noise. And once you see their silence for what it truly is, a weapon, not wisdom, it starts to lose its power. The moment you stop chasing their voice, the weapon turns back on them. When a narcissist goes silent after hurting you, they're not ignoring you by accident. They're studying you. They want to see what you'll do next. Every unanswered message, every moment you spend overthinking is part of their experiment. They know your reaction gives them power. The more you reach out, the more they feel in control. Your pain becomes their validation, your confusion their satisfaction. It's not just about silence, it's about watching how much of yourself you're willing to give just to get a crumb of attention back. They feed off that energy because deep down they don't feel powerful on their own. They only feel strong when someone else is emotionally weak. That's why they ignore your messages but still check if you've seen theirs. They disappear, yet they keep an eye on your every move. They want to know if you're still waiting, still wondering, still hoping. It's all about control, emotional control. Every text you send, every long message explaining how much you care becomes fuel for their ego. They don't read your words with empathy.
They read them as proof that you're still hooked. They thrive on the idea that they can break you, vanish, and still make you come running back. And when you finally stop responding, that's when they panic. Because your silence, unlike theirs, carries truth. It exposes their weakness. When you stop reacting, the dynamic shifts. They no longer have power. That's when they suddenly check in, pretending to care, acting confused as if they didn't just ignore you for days or weeks. They come back not because they miss you, but because they miss the control your reactions gave them. The moment you stop reacting is the moment their illusion starts to crumble. See, narcissists depend on emotional chaos. They need someone else's emotions to survive. It's their oxygen. So when you're upset, when you chase, when you explain yourself, you're unknowingly keeping the cycle alive. But when you stay calm, when you stop explaining and stop seeking closure, something shifts inside them. They can't handle indifference. They can't stand being irrelevant. Your silence becomes their mirror, reflecting back their emptiness, their lack of power, their need for validation. It's ironic, the very silence they once used to punish you becomes the same silence that destroys them when it comes from you. That's the true power of your reaction. When you no longer respond to manipulation, you take back control of your peace. The narcissist loses interest because there's nothing left to feed on. And that's when you finally realize their silence never had power on its own. It was always your reaction that made it powerful. The day you stop reacting, the weapon loses its edge, and you finally set yourself free.
When a narcissist ignores you, it's not just about silence, it's about control. In their mind, every moment they withhold attention, every unanswered message, every delay in responding is a move in a psychological game they believe they're winning. They decide when to talk, when to disappear, when to care, and when to turn cold. It gives them the illusion that they are in charge, that your emotions are strings they can pull whenever they choose. To them, control is love. It's how they feel significant. But it's not real control, it's a performance, a fragile illusion built on manipulation and fear. You see, narcissists can't survive without dominance. They need to feel like they're always one step ahead, always the one calling the shots. Ignoring you is their way of reminding themselves that they still have power over you, even after the argument, even after the damage. They don't want mutual respect, they want emotional submission. When you sit there, waiting for a reply, wondering what you did wrong, they feel validated. That tiny spark of hope in you, that maybe they'll come back. Maybe this time will be different. That's what keeps them going. It's not love they want, it's control over your thoughts, your emotions, and your reactions. But here's the truth they'll never admit. Their power only exists as long as you believe in it. They might act like they're in control, but deep down they're terrified of losing the influence they have over you. The moment you stop seeking their approval, their illusion begins to crack. They can't handle it when you no longer respond to their emotional games, because without your reaction, they're left with themselves, and that's a reality they can't bear. That's why they vanish and reappear, push and pull, love bomb, and then go silent. It's all part of the cycle to make you believe they decide your worth. In truth, their control isn't real. It's borrowed. It depends entirely on your emotional energy. When you're confused, they feel powerful. When you stop overthinking and focus on yourself, their control dissolves. That's why the greatest revenge isn't confrontation, it's detachment. When you no longer care whether they text back, when their silence no longer shakes you, they lose everything they were trying to hold on to. You see, narcissists don't actually want peace or equality. They want dominance without effort. They need to feel like they're above you, even though they're emotionally dependent on you. So the next time they ignore you to feel powerful, remember this: they don't control the silence, you do. The moment you stop trying to make sense of their behavior and turn inward, you shatter their illusion completely.
Their control was never real. It was only ever a reflection of how much power you gave away. And once you see through that illusion, their games lose their meaning, because the one thing a narcissist can't manipulate is someone who no longer needs their validation.
The narcissist's silence isn't just cold, it's calculated. It's an emotional starvation tactic, a way to make you crave their attention the way someone craves air after being held underwater. They know exactly what they're doing when they pull away. They know your empathy will start working overtime, trying to understand them, trying to fix things, trying to make peace. They rely on that part of you, the kind, patient, forgiving part, because it's the part they can exploit the most. When they go silent, it's not to solve the problem. It's to make you feel the loss of connection so deeply that you'll do anything to restore it. This tactic is about control through deprivation. By withdrawing affection, communication, and validation, they create an emotional drought, one that leaves you anxious, confused, and desperate for even a drop of kindness. They know that after days of coldness, a single message or small gesture from them will feel like relief. That's how they reset the cycle. You begin to equate their minimal attention with love and their silence with punishment. Without realizing it, you start working harder for something you should have been freely given: respect, care, and consistency. They turn your natural desire for connection into a tool of manipulation. The narcissist uses silence the same way a puppeteer uses strings. They disappear to make you panic, then reappear to make you grateful. It's emotional conditioning, like teaching your heart to jump every time they pull back. You start believing that if you could just love them better, communicate better, or forgive faster, maybe they'd stop pulling away. But they won't, because the silence itself is the point. It gives them the thrill of control. They watch how far you'll go to earn what should have been yours from the start: basic decency. And here's the cruel truth. They enjoy seeing you starve for affection. It feeds their ego to know you still care, still hope, still wait. Your tears and your longing confirm that they still have emotional power over you. But what they'll never admit is that this silence also exposes them. Because people who genuinely love you don't disappear to make you suffer. They communicate. They work through things. They don't punish you with absence. They comfort you with understanding. The narcissist's silence, then, isn't strength. It's immaturity dressed as control. The moment you recognize this tactic for what it is, manipulation, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop feeding the game. Because real connection doesn't require you to beg for crumbs. You start giving yourself what they withhold: peace, love, attention, and the power shifts instantly. The emotional starvation they created loses its effect the second you realize you were never starving for them. You were starving for the love you kept giving away.
With a narcissist, even honesty can become a crime. The moment you express emotion, question their behavior, or set a boundary, they twist it into an offense. Suddenly, you've done something wrong. You've upset their fragile sense of superiority. And so, they punish you. Not with words, but with withdrawal. They go silent, detached, and cold, as if your emotions are something shameful, something they must make you regret. This isn't just avoidance, it's strategic punishment. The narcissist's goal is to teach you a lesson. Feel less, question less, obey more. They want you to associate your emotions with loss. When you cry, they turn away. When you speak truth, they disappear. When you call out their behavior, they act like you're the problem. That's how they slowly train you to silence yourself. You begin to walk on eggshells, holding back your feelings to avoid their coldness. It's a cruel conditioning process, one that teaches you that love means suppression and that peace only comes when you stay quiet. Their withdrawal becomes a form of control, forcing you to chase connection just to stop feeling the chill of their absence. This kind of punishment is deeply confusing because it mimics rejection. You start believing that your emotions are too much, that maybe you did overreact, or that being silent is safer than being honest. That's exactly what they want, for you to second-guess yourself. Every time you question your right to feel, their power grows. They thrive on your hesitation, on your need to make things right. It gives them the upper hand without ever having to raise their voice. They don't need to shout. They just need to vanish. And in that silence, they make you do all the emotional labor, apologizing, explaining, softening your truth, while they watch from a distance, satisfied that you've learned to censor yourself. But here's the truth they'll never tell you. Your emotions were never the problem. Their inability to face them was. Narcissists fear real emotion because it exposes what they lack: empathy, vulnerability, depth. When you express your feelings, it reminds them of their own emptiness. It threatens the mask they wear to look strong and in control. So instead of meeting you with compassion, they punish you for revealing what they can't handle within themselves. The punishment for feeling is meant to break your spirit, to make you think emotional connection is dangerous. But in reality, it's the opposite. Your ability to feel deeply, to speak truth, to love sincerely, that's your strength, not your weakness. When you stop apologizing for your emotions and stop chasing those who punish you for having them, you reclaim your power. Because real love doesn't punish expression, it welcomes it. And anyone who withdraws when you speak from the heart isn't protecting peace, they're protecting their ego.
When a narcissist disappears, it often feels final. The silence stretches for days, maybe weeks, and you begin to tell yourself it's over. You replay the last argument, trying to understand what went wrong. And somewhere in that loneliness, you start to accept the possibility that they're gone for good. But just when you begin to breathe again, when you start to reclaim your peace, they return. A text, a call, a sudden reappearance as if nothing happened. They might even smile, act affectionate, or talk about missing you. And in that moment, your heart softens, your guard lowers, and you start to believe maybe this time things will be different. But this isn't reconciliation, it's manipulation. This disappearing and reappearing act is what I call the reset game. They don't vanish to end things, they vanish to regain control. Their silence is never about reflection or growth. It's a calculated pause, a break in communication designed to make you crave them again. They know your relief will override your anger once they come back. They know that when they finally reappear, the pain of missing them will make you forgive faster, speak softer, and accept less. It's not love bringing them back. It's the hunger for control that never went away. You see, the narcissist thrives on emotional imbalance. When they leave, you spiral into confusion, heartbreak, and longing. You question your worth, wondering why you weren't enough to make them stay. During that time, they feel powerful, because even in their absence, they occupy your mind. You start to build an emotional debt, a quiet desperation for closure, clarity, or comfort. And when they finally return, they collect on that debt. They come back to find you vulnerable, emotionally starved, and ready to trade your boundaries for connection. It's a cruel kind of timing. They always return when they know you'll be most forgiving. This reset allows them to avoid accountability. It's their shortcut through conflict.
Instead of facing the damage they caused, they simply disappear long enough for emotions to fade. Then, when they return, they pretend nothing ever happened. If you bring up the past, they'll dismiss it. That was so long ago. Why are you still holding on to that? Or, can't we just move forward? It's a way to erase their mistakes without ever apologizing. They count on your empathy to help them start fresh, even though nothing has truly changed. Each reset keeps you trapped in a cycle of pain disguised as reconciliation. Over time, these resets become the rhythm of the relationship. You start to recognize the pattern: chaos, silence, return, repeat. Every disappearance deepens your confusion, and every return rekindles false hope. You begin to live for those rare moments of affection that follow the silence, those temporary highs that make you forget the lows. That's exactly what they want. They condition you to associate relief with their presence, even if that presence is toxic. They become the source of both your pain and your comfort, and that's what makes escaping so difficult. But behind that illusion of control, the narcissist is deeply insecure. They play the reset game not because they're strong, but because they're afraid. Afraid of losing dominance, afraid of being forgotten, afraid of being exposed for who they really are. The silence gives them a false sense of power, as if they're the one deciding the pace of the relationship. But the truth is, they're addicted to the very attention they try to manipulate. Their ego needs reassurance just as much as your heart once needed love. When they sense you're detaching or moving on, that's when they reappear. Not out of love, but out of fear of losing control over you. Each reset also feeds their narrative. They convince themselves that you'll always take them back, that they can disappear and return without consequence. It reassures their fragile ego. See, I still matter. They still want me. What they don't realize is that every return erodes the connection a little more. You start to see through the charm, the apologies, the false promises. The reset game, once powerful, begins to lose its magic the moment you recognize the pattern. And that's where your healing begins, in awareness. Once you understand that their disappearance isn't a mystery, but a method, you stop romanticizing their return. You start to see it for what it is: emotional manipulation designed to reset your forgiveness, not rebuild your trust. You realize that their silence wasn't a sign of maturity or reflection. It was a trap, a way to weaken your boundaries through time and distance. You begin to detach, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understand the difference between love and control. When they come back, and they will, you'll notice how predictable it feels. The same tone, the same words, the same excuses. But instead of excitement, you'll feel clarity. You'll remember the pain behind their vanishing act and recognize that you no longer need their validation to feel whole. That's when their power breaks. Because the reset game only works when you're still playing. The moment you choose not to respond, not to reopen the door, the illusion collapses. The narcissist expects your relief. They expect you to forget the silence and welcome them back. But when you remain calm, unbothered, and firm, it disarms them completely. They don't know how to handle someone who no longer reacts. Their control was never real. It only existed in your willingness to keep forgiving. Once you stop participating, they lose the script, and the reset turns into their reality check. The final truth is this: narcissists don't reset for love, they reset for dominance. They use absence to weaken your strength and return to rebuild their throne. But every time you choose peace over chaos, silence over reaction, boundaries over reconciliation, their game ends a little more. Because real connection doesn't require constant resets.
It requires accountability, honesty, and consistency. The narcissist will never offer that because it would mean giving up control. But you can. You can reset your own life, not for them, but for yourself. And when you do, you realize something powerful. You never needed their return to heal. You just needed the silence to teach you who they really were and who you've always been without them. Someone strong enough to close the door and never open it again.
When a narcissist ignores you after hurting you, it's not just silence, it's strategy. They want to flip the script so that somehow you become the villain in your own pain. This is what's called projection. They take everything they're guilty of, cruelty, manipulation, emotional chaos, and hand it right back to you like a poisoned gift. Suddenly, you're too emotional. You're overreacting. You're the one who can't let things go. And while you sit there, spiraling in confusion, they sit in silence, calm, collected, and detached, making it look like you're the unstable one. Their silence becomes a stage, and they play the role of the reasonable person, the one who doesn't want drama. But don't be fooled. This calm exterior is an act. Behind it lies a need to dominate the emotional narrative. By saying nothing, they force you to question everything, your feelings, your memories, even your sanity. You start wondering, did I really overreact? Was I too harsh? Did I cause this distance? And that's exactly what they want. Every doubt you have becomes another thread in their web of control. Projection is one of the narcissist's sharpest weapons because it hides in plain sight. It doesn't scream or shout, it whispers, subtly twisting your perception until their wrongs look justified and your pain looks irrational. Their silence reinforces this illusion. They'll withdraw affection, ignore your messages, and act unaffected, as if you're the one who caused the rift. It's a cruel emotional gaslight, convincing you that their absence is a logical response to your behavior. This is psychological warfare disguised as distance. Narcissists rely on your empathy. They know you'll try to fix things, to understand, to take responsibility. And once you do, they've won. You start apologizing for things you didn't even do, simply to break the silence. You reach out to restore peace, not realizing that peace was never their goal. Power was. Every time you chase them for answers, they gain validation. Every time you second-guess yourself, their ego expands. It's a cycle of guilt and confusion they masterfully design. By the time they finally speak again, you're so relieved to have their attention that you don't notice the trap closing tighter. Their projection worked. You've been conditioned to believe that the problem is you. But here's the truth. Their calm is not maturity. Their silence is not strength. It's a calculated act to avoid accountability and keep you emotionally dependent. Real strength would mean having a conversation, owning their actions, and repairing the damage. But narcissists don't repair. They rewrite. They reshape reality until they come out looking innocent and you come out looking unstable. So the next time they turn cold and vanish, remember, their silence isn't peace, and it isn't proof that you're wrong. It's their way of controlling the story by making you question your own.
When a narcissist ignores you, it's not just a moment of silence, it's a performance. They want to be seen as untouchable, as if your emotions no longer affect them, as if they've risen above you. Their silence becomes their weapon of choice, a way to project superiority and control. They want you to believe that they are the prize, the one with all the power, while you're left scrambling for their attention, trying to make sense of their emotional withdrawal. This "I'm above you" attitude is not real confidence. It's theater. It's their insecurity dressed up as power. Deep down, narcissists are terrified of emotional vulnerability. They can't handle being confronted, being held accountable, or being exposed for who they really are. So when they hurt you, they vanish, not because they don't care, but because they can't face the reality of their own behavior. Their silence says, "I'm in control." But what it really means is, "I'm too fragile to deal with the truth." They create this illusion of superiority because they need it to survive emotionally. Their entire sense of self-worth depends on feeling above others. To them, relationships aren't built on love or equality. They're a hierarchy. Someone has to be on top, and it has to be them. So when they hurt you and then ignore you, it reinforces their fantasy. You're the needy one. You're the emotional one. I'm the strong one. But the reality couldn't be further from the truth. Their power isn't real. It's borrowed from your reaction. Every time you cry, text, or try to reach out, you unknowingly feed this illusion. They interpret your pain as proof of their importance. Your silence makes them uneasy, but your attempts to reconnect make them feel superior. It's a twisted loop, one they depend on to keep their fragile ego intact. You see, narcissists can't survive on self-assurance alone. They need constant validation, whether through admiration or emotional chaos. When they ignore you, they're feeding off the idea that you're still emotionally entangled, still chasing, still trying to fix what's broken. That, to them, feels like power. But here's what they'll never admit. Behind that mask of confidence lies fear. They fear irrelevance. They fear being truly seen. They fear losing the person who once adored them, because without that admiration, they have to face their own emptiness. Their silence is a defense mechanism, a way to avoid feeling small or powerless. They pretend you don't matter because deep down, you matter too much. You've seen their real self, the one they work so hard to hide, and that terrifies them. So they play this game of distance. They'll act like you're replaceable, like you're just another name in their contact list. They'll post things online to make you think they've moved on, or act indifferent when you cross their path, but it's all part of the show, a desperate attempt to rewrite the story and make themselves the hero. Their ego demands that they appear in control even when they're breaking inside. This false sense of superiority also serves another purpose. It shields them from accountability. If they convince themselves that they're better than you, they don't have to face the guilt of what they did. It's easier to believe that you deserved it, that you were too sensitive, that you made them do it. Their superiority complex becomes their escape hatch from responsibility. It's not about strength. It's about survival. Over time, this illusion starts to crack. You begin to see patterns, how their confidence only exists when someone else is suffering, how their calmness turns into panic when they lose control. You start realizing that their silence isn't power, it's avoidance. They're not detached, they're emotionally stunted. The person who claims to be above it all can't even handle a mature conversation or take ownership of their mistakes. That's not superiority, that's fear in disguise. And once you see it, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop giving their silence meaning it doesn't deserve. You begin to understand that their need to feel superior says nothing about your worth and everything about their wounds. Because truly strong people don't need to ignore others to feel powerful. They don't need to make someone small to feel big. Real strength lies in empathy, in communication, in accountability. All things a narcissist runs from. The moment you stop reacting, their illusion begins to crumble. The control they thought they had evaporates. Their silence, once their weapon, turns into their weakness. They start to feel the void they tried to fill with dominance. You'll see it in how they try to return, in how they test your boundaries, in how they subtly try to regain control. Because deep down, the narcissist never truly lets go, not out of love, but out of dependency. They need your energy to feel significant. So when they ignore you after hurting you, remember, it's not a reflection of your worth, it's a mirror of their fear. They act superior because they can't afford to feel equal. They vanish to escape their own shame. Their silence is loud, but it's not the truth. It's a hollow echo of insecurity dressed as confidence. And while they're busy pretending to be above you, you're already rising, not to prove them wrong, but to free yourself from the illusion that they ever were.
What a narcissist fears more than anything isn't losing you. It's losing control over you. Their silence, their arrogance, their cold indifference. All of it is designed to keep you emotionally bound to them. But the moment you stop reacting, the entire illusion begins to collapse. The power they once held wasn't in their silence itself. It was in how you responded to it. When you finally detach, when their silence no longer brings you pain, confusion, or obsession, that's when their greatest fear comes true. You see, narcissists thrive on emotional reaction. Your frustration, your tears, your attempts to explain or reconcile, all of that feeds them. It's their invisible fuel. They read your emotions like energy, proof that they still matter, proof that they still have power. But when you stop giving that reaction, when you stop explaining, defending, or questioning, they feel it. The silence that once controlled you suddenly turns against them. Because now they're the ones wondering, why aren't you chasing me? Why aren't you broken? Why does my silence mean nothing? That's the moment they panic, though they'll never show it. They might test you, sending a vague message, liking an old photo, pretending to accidentally run into you. Anything to see if there's still a reaction left to harvest. Because in their mind, indifference is death. It means the game is over. It means you've woken up. And for a narcissist, your awakening is the one thing they can't control or manipulate. When you detach emotionally, it forces them to face what they've always been running from, themselves. Without someone else to project onto, to blame, to provoke, they're left alone with their own emptiness. And that emptiness is unbearable. They've spent their entire lives avoiding it, filling it with chaos, admiration, or drama. But when you stop playing, when you refuse to feed their ego with your reactions, they're forced to sit with the truth. Without your energy, they are powerless. They fear your peace. They fear your silence, not the desperate silence they use to manipulate, but the calm, grounded silence that comes from healing. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your worth, and simply walk away, you become untouchable. And nothing threatens a narcissist more than someone they can't shake. Your detachment breaks the psychological spell. Suddenly, the tactics that once worked, the guilt trips, the cold shoulders, the disappearances, lose their power. You see them clearly now, not as powerful beings, but as deeply insecure individuals using emotional tricks to survive. Their mask slips, and you realize the truth. The one who seemed in control was the most desperate for it all along. What they fear most isn't rejection. They reject people all the time. It's irrelevance. Narcissists survive by staying in your mind, living rent-free in your thoughts. They don't need your love as much as they need your attention. But when your mind becomes quiet, when you stop replaying the past or craving their validation, you've done the one thing they never expected. You've set yourself free. They can't manipulate someone who no longer seeks their approval.
They can't control someone who no longer explains themselves. They can't punish someone who no longer feels guilty. That's when you reclaim the power they once stole, not by fighting them, but by no longer needing anything from them at all. In the end, your indifference becomes their punishment. Your peace becomes their mirror. And in that reflection, they finally see what they've always feared, that their power was never real. It only existed in your belief that it was. The truth is, they never feared losing you. They feared losing your reaction. They feared the day you'd stop seeing them as a force and start seeing them as a wound. Because once you see that, once you realize that their silence is just noise trying to sound like power, the spell breaks for good. And when you no longer need their attention, approval, or explanation, you become what they cannot be, free.
There comes a moment, quiet, powerful, and almost sacred, when something inside you shifts. You stop checking your phone. You stop rehearsing what you'd say if they ever reached out. You stop waiting for closure that will never come. It's the moment you stop chasing the narcissist. And though it might not look dramatic from the outside, spiritually and emotionally, it's a revolution. Because for the first time, the power dynamic turns. Their silence, once used to control you, becomes the very thing that traps them. For so long, their silence was your torment. You couldn't understand how someone could hurt you and then vanish as if you didn't matter. You'd replay every word, every look, every argument, trying to find the moment when things went wrong. You thought if you could just understand them, maybe you could fix it. Maybe they'd finally see your heart, your effort, your love. But narcissists don't seek understanding. They seek dominance. Every unanswered message, every ignored call, every cold look, it was all part of their illusion of power. The more you reached, the more they felt in control. But here's the irony they never see coming. Control built on someone else's pain is fragile. It can't last. Because eventually, even the most empathetic soul gets tired of bleeding for someone who doesn't care. Eventually, you realize that chasing them is like running toward a mirage. No matter how far you go, you'll never reach what you're hoping for. And that's the breaking point. The day you stop chasing is the day you stop feeding the illusion. When you stop reaching out, they feel it instantly. Not because they care about your feelings, but because the energy shift unsettles them. For the first time, they're not the center of your world, and they can sense it. The silence that once gave them power now echoes back at them cold and empty. It's like shouting into a void that no longer responds. Narcissists need your reaction to feel alive. Without it, their ego begins to starve. They'll pretend not to notice at first. They'll keep their distance, acting calm and detached, as if your absence means nothing. But behind that mask, panic starts to grow. They'll start watching your moves in silence, checking your social media, asking about you through others, or even testing you with small provocations. They're desperate to know, did I really lose control? Are they really over me? Because in their world, love isn't measured in connection, it's measured in control. And here's the beauty of this moment. You no longer respond. You no longer explain. You no longer care about what story they tell or how they twist the truth. You start living, not pretending, not performing, but living. You find yourself smiling again, sleeping peacefully, doing things that once felt impossible when your thoughts were consumed by them. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes peace. Their absence, which once broke you, becomes your healing space. This shift terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. Narcissists know how to handle anger. They thrive on it. They know how to handle tears. They use them to feel powerful. But they don't know what to do with indifference. Indifference exposes their irrelevance. It strips away the illusion that they were ever in control. When you stop chasing,
You hold up a mirror that shows them the truth they've always hidden from. Without your energy, they are nothing. They might try to reappear, not because they've changed, but because they need your reaction again. They'll test the waters, maybe with a text that says, "Hey, just thinking about you," or a casual comment on something you post. It's not affection, it's curiosity. They want to see if the old spell still works, but when you no longer take the bait, when you respond with grace or not at all, they're confronted with the one thing they fear most: your emotional freedom. This is the power they can't imitate. They can act confident, pretend to be unaffected, even brag about moving on. But deep down, they know the truth. You broke free. You took back the energy they stole. You stopped letting their silence dictate your worth. And that's when the balance of power reverses completely. Now, they are the ones haunted by the silence. Every moment they used to enjoy your chase, your pleading, your confusion, now it's gone. They're left alone with the reality they tried so hard to avoid. They're not the center anymore. Their silence becomes a prison of their own making. They can't manipulate what they can't reach. They can't control what no longer responds. You, on the other hand, begin to experience something they never will: genuine peace. It's not just relief that they're gone. It's the deep realization that your value never depended on their attention. You start to understand that love isn't about convincing someone to care. It's about caring for yourself enough to walk away from those who don't. And with every day that passes, their power fades. You start remembering who you were before their manipulation, the laughter, the light, the confidence they tried to take from you. You rebuild it piece by piece. And as you rise, their silence, the very thing that once broke you, becomes meaningless. Because now you know, silence can't hurt you unless you give it power. The narcissist's greatest weapon was never their charm or their cruelty. It was your belief that you needed their validation. Once that belief dies, so does their control. The moment you stop chasing isn't just the end of their game, it's the beginning of your freedom. Their silence, once a cage, becomes their own confinement. And you walk out of it stronger, calmer, radiant, no longer reaching for someone who was never capable of reaching back. That's the irony of it all. They thought your silence would destroy you, but in the end, it saved you. It broke the spell. It showed you that peace isn't found in their presence. It's found in your decision to stop chasing ghosts and start choosing yourself.
There comes a moment, often quiet and unseen, when everything shifts. Not because the narcissist suddenly changes, but because you do. The tables turn in a way they never expected. What they meant to destroy you with, their cruelty, their silence, their manipulation, becomes the very thing that frees you. That's the beauty of divine justice. It doesn't need to announce itself with thunder. It moves silently, patiently, and perfectly. And when it arrives, the one who tried to break you ends up watching you rise in ways they can't explain. Because it wasn't revenge that lifted you. It was divine restoration. For a long time, you couldn't see it. You were trapped in confusion, replaying their words, their betrayals, their indifference. Their silence cut deeper than any insult could. It made you question your worth, your sanity, your heart. You tried to make sense of their coldness, tried to understand how someone could inflict so much pain and feel nothing. You begged God for answers, for closure, for something, anything that could make it make sense. And in those moments of brokenness, it felt like heaven was silent too. But it wasn't. Heaven was watching, waiting for the right moment. Not to punish, but to reveal. Because divine justice doesn't operate on human timing. It unfolds in stillness, through the slow healing of your heart, through the lessons you didn't know you were learning.
Every tear you cried became a seed planted in the soil of transformation. You didn't know it then, but while you were in the valley, something sacred was happening. You were being rebuilt. You started to realize that their silence wasn't the end. It was a redirection. It pushed you inward, forcing you to sit with yourself, to confront the wounds you had ignored for too long. You learned that your worth isn't determined by who responds or who disappears. You discovered strength in solitude, peace in your own presence. The silence that once shattered you became your teacher, showing you how to hear the whispers of your own soul, the voice that the narcissist tried so hard to drown out. And here's where divine justice begins to show itself. The very silence they used to control you starts to work against them. You no longer react, you no longer chase, you no longer care about their approval or their absence. And in that stillness, you find peace. The kind of peace that confuses the very people who tried to destroy it. Your detachment becomes your protection. Your healing becomes their exposure. Because while you're moving forward, they're stuck in the same cycles, repeating the same patterns, unable to escape their own emptiness. Divine justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like you thriving quietly while they fade into the background of your story. It's the universe showing that what was meant for your pain became the foundation of your purpose. Every wound turned into wisdom. Every rejection became redirection. Every loss became a blessing disguised as heartbreak. And the best part? You don't even have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge, prove your worth, or make them regret. Life itself takes care of that. Because eventually, the narcissist faces their own silence. But this time, it's not strategic. It's isolating. The same tactics they use to control others start turning inward. People stop believing their lies. Their charm loses its shine. Their power fades as the truth of who they are catches up to them. They start to feel the emptiness they once projected onto others. And while they're surrounded by noise, it's their own soul that goes quiet. Because deep down, they know they've lost something real, something they can't replace. You. Meanwhile, your silence speaks louder than anything they could ever say. It's not the silence of confusion or pain anymore. It's the silence of peace, of closure, of divine alignment. You've outgrown the chaos they thrive on. You've stepped into a higher vibration where their energy can no longer reach you. That's the real victory. Not watching them fall, but realizing you no longer need them to. You begin to understand that divine justice isn't about seeing them suffer. It's about seeing yourself free. It's about watching the version of you that once begged for love evolve into someone who knows they are love. The silence that once haunted you becomes sacred, a sound of healing, of clarity, of divine protection. What once felt like abandonment now feels like grace. Because if they hadn't hurt you, you might never have awakened to your true strength. That's the paradox of divine justice. It transforms pain into power, betrayal into wisdom, endings into beginnings. It doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. And when you look back, you realize that everything unfolded exactly as it needed to. Their silence didn't break you. It broke your attachment to them. Their cruelty didn't destroy your heart. It taught your heart boundaries. Their manipulation didn't erase your worth. It revealed it. And as this awareness deepens, something miraculous happens. Forgiveness. Not for them, but for yourself. You forgive yourself for staying too long, for hoping too much, for caring too deeply for someone incapable of doing the same. That's when divine justice reaches its highest form, not revenge, but release. You no longer need them to feel pain for you to feel peace. Your healing is the justice. In time, you'll see it unfold, in subtle but unmistakable ways. Doors will open for you that were never meant for them. Peace will follow you wherever chaos once lived. You'll attract genuine love, real connection, and experiences that align with your higher self. And the narcissist? They'll watch. Not because you want them to, but because that's how divine balance works. Those who tried to destroy your light are forced to witness it grow brighter. That's divine justice. Quiet, precise, unstoppable. So remember this, the silence that once broke you was never a punishment. It was preparation. It was God removing the noise so you could finally hear yourself. It was the universe clearing space for something sacred, your awakening. And while they're still chasing control, you found something far greater: peace, purpose, and freedom. In the end, divine justice unfolds exactly as it should, not with vengeance, but with transformation. You rise, they face themselves, and the silence that once echoed with pain now hums with power. What they meant for your downfall became your ascension. And that quiet, holy shift is the sound of divine justice unfolding.